All right. Pink Floyd's Another Brick in the Wall. Something we're trying to avoid, by the way, with the work we're doing here at LaGuardia Community College, our student-centered approach to learning. And today's show is all about that. We're going to be talking about the Middle States self-study process with our co-chairs of the Middle States Committee here, Professors Reem Jafar of the Math, Engineering, and Computer Science Department, and Justin Rogers Cooper of the English Department. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having us. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Are you really?
Yeah.
You
We
excited?
See you, Hugo, anytime.
Yeah, I promised you it was going to be conversational and fun. And I told you a little bit about the format. So why don't we start by having you talk a little bit about yourselves. Tell us a little bit about your backgrounds, your studies before LaGuardia.
Sure.
Who'd like to go first?
Reem, you want to go first? You want me to? Okay, I'll jump in. Let's see, who am I? Well, I came to LaGuardia about 10 years ago, I think, with Reem. And I had been finishing my PhD at the CUNY Graduate Center, a likely story, a common story. And I came in as a lecturer, finished the dissertation, moved to a full-time line, I think in 2011, 2012, somewhere in there. And prior to that, I'd been kind of adjuncting as a graduate student at Kingsborough and Queens College. I'd been a writing fellow at LaGuardia for a couple years. So really, I feel like I started getting to know the English department here at LaGuardia around 2008, and had been here for those couple years before I started on the lectureship line. And about 3 or 4 years into my time here, I was a at-large senator very briefly, back in the days when you could run for those seats unopposed. And somebody was like, just go ahead and run. And I was like, awesome, and did a couple sort of reports as a part of the transfer subcommittee that came out of the Pathways hoopla. And in my conversations with Provost Arcario at the time, he asked me, why are you doing this? Because I was, working with a few other people to write these 100-page reports and do all this data-driven stuff on student transfer, et cetera. And I was like, I just like, getting in the mix in a way that I'm sure the two of you can identify with. And he was like, you shouldn't have told me that. And the next year, I was recruited to serve on the assessment committee that came out of our last self-study. And then the year after that, moved into a co-directorship role of assessment here at the college with our colleague Regina Lehman from Health Sciences. And then I was in that role until Reem and I started with our Middle States gig here as the co-chairs of the self-study. That was last year. So we just finished our second year of that 3-year process. And so now I find myself, working with Reem, talking a lot about Middle States and self-studies in a way that I'm sure your listeners will be bored to hear. And that's yeah. Well, we'll do our best to spice it up. And that's kind of how I find myself talking to the two of you today. I think that's my story here.
Yeah, but you leapfrogged over some things. So you're in English. Your PhD is in English.
That's right.
And what was the focus?
My focus was on 19th century literature and culture, kind of in the U.S., but sort of a hemispheric take. And my dissertation was on crowds and the 19th century American novel. And after I came to LaGuardia, I sort of rebooted my scholarly focus that kind of emerged from that, but I sort of kind of retrained myself over the last decade to be an American studies professor. And that's actually, I have a position in the faculty in the Masters of Liberal Studies program over the Graduate Center, the MALS program. And it's in the American Studies track. And so even though I would say my PhD was American Studies adjacent, and I took classes with a lot of folks that I think would I consider to be in the field in big ways. At the same time, I didn't really start purposefully thinking about American Studies as an interdiscipline and sort of actively writing in that mode of scholarship until the last 10 years. And so that's kind of been the main vehicle of my sort of intellectual and scholarly pursuits since I've been here at the college. Although I've kept how do you say it? I've kept a foot in the pool of assessment scholarship, and so I have somehow been writing and thinking about assessment and accreditation along the side. And so I have a kind of schizophrenic or split academic personality between a sort of active 19th century studies, early 20th century, long Gilded Age, American politics and culture dude, and someone who, spent the last 2 or 3 weeks kind of looking at the entire history of accreditation and assessment in higher education since the 1980s as part of a current project. So I have that kind of weird split two-face identity here.
Janice, yes.
There you go. Yeah.
All right, let's be academics.
There you go.
Reem, what you want to talk a little bit about yourself, your background, things like that?
Yes, hi everyone. So I just like Justin explained, we have some parallel in there.
We're getting echoing. Am I the only one that's hearing that?
Yeah, there is echoing.
Do you have do you have headphones? This is something we should have caught in the pre-show. You don't have like a headset or microphone?
I have this one.
Uh-oh. You're seeing this in real-time tech solving issues.
Now I heard the echoing for a bit. Is it still echoing now?
No, now it stopped. Go ahead for a little while.
Maybe it's my initial energy. Let's see how it goes. So hi, yeah, just like Justin, I'm also a product of the CUNY Graduate Center, but I was in the physics departments there. And my main research was done at Lehman College because most of the science research used to be done on various campuses. And so I graduated in 2010 and I joined that cohort at LaGuardia alongside Justin, where we met in the famous new faculty club. And from there, my path hasn't been linear. It started just like the traditional academic path. I was doing some research in my original field, which is about low temperature magnetism, theoretical and computational work, not experimental work. And in the process, I co-founded the Mass Society with a couple of my colleagues, Yelena Baishensky, who's no longer at LaGuardia, and Shanglan Yuan, who's still a dear colleague of mine. And this is how the first few years went, 3-4 years. And then I had the interest to run for a Senate seat, which I did during my second year when I was on maternity leave, but people didn't know me well enough at the time, and I think I was elected as an alternate. So a few years, like 4 or 5 years into my career at LaGuardia, I've decided to give the Senate seat another shot and to engage in a real campaign. I went and I spoke with folks and I asked them, not just to vote for me, but why I really wanted to represent them. And so I won that seat. And then this is when I started learning and get this holistic view of the college. And at the same time, along that time, I also became the co-director of the Academic Peer Instruction Program, which is a supplemental instruction program. And it gave me that bigger mentoring role for students, something I'm very passionate about. And so in the Senate, I eventually became the chair of the Committee of Faculty. And at the same time, this is when the first coach survey results, like we all remember, came about. And we realized that our work is more important than ever before. And this, as challenging as the results of those coach surveys were, as much as it brought a lot of folks together, get us to know other faculty on campus, even talk with staff, see, what issues we have in parallel, where do our needs need. And then after I finished, I think 3 terms in the Senate, this is when I basically started doing this jig with Justin about middle states. So as you see here and there, my scholarship has shifted a bit. I've done a lot of work on supplemental instruction. I published on that. I published in mathematical pedagogy. I've done a lot of research about writing in math, and I've written about it as well. And I've taken a sabbatical in 2019 where I code back was a physics problem that I've had from before, and I managed to finish it during my sabbatical. And like Justin, I do have also some interest in assessment. So as you see, our path is non-linear. It's like do. So, and here I am doing this middle estate, what we call fun stuff, even though our provost is like, how do you find this fun? But continuing on the work in the Senate, the good thing about middle estates, really, and I say this to everyone, it helped us meet a lot of other folks on campus. It helped us understand the issues we all faced from a broader perspective. And it's been really a great experience so far.
I mean, I worked with you too in the Senate in my years on when I was in the Senate. And it's always kind of fascinating because people always thought like I was actually accomplishing something in the Senate. And I don't really remember it that way. I remember making a lot of noise. I think Justin had to sit me down one time and say like, hey, Hugo, you have great ideas, but the way you say it does not make people want to work with you.
I have no recollection of this.
You don't have any recollection of that? That's okay. I remember it that way. Something like that.
Well,
but the two of you in the Senate, I remember, have really accomplished major things. I mean, Justin, that report, which by the way, I think we need to pull up because I'm actually on some sort of task force about transfer with the president. It would be interesting to see that again, get a 100-page thing, which was out of control. I couldn't believe it. And by the way, got to a lot of attention when you generate. And then, Reem taking over that role because I had been the chair of that committee of committee of faculty. And I don't remember what that was. That was like herding cats, really. But you've really accomplished a lot of stuff, particularly with the coach survey and bringing Paul in in his role first as the provost and then interim president again now as the provost to really address things. And I've always, now when I come back to the Senate, I mean, I know Justin, you're also just a visitor there, but when Reem was running it, I was always really impressed because you always, I think we both, maybe, I don't know if you've experienced this as a role in service at the college, but one of the problems with service is like, how do you get out of it once you're in it? And one of the fears is that no one will take it over, or if you split, the whole thing's going to fall apart. And of course, that's just my ego. Because like I've said, that in the case of, for example, the committee of faculty, you've done a wonderful job, Reem. And, when I was in that role that everybody laughed at, the chair, the committee of committees, the chair of that committee, Will Fulton took that over and did like a bang up job for the time that he was there. So, but, it's interesting because I wanted to talk about all the things you did at this part of the hour, and you've kind of done that. So maybe we should talk a little bit. First of all, did either one of you participate in the last Middle States like 10 years ago, whatever it was that we did it? Because I did. And I was a junior, I wasn't junior faculty in the sense of I've been at the college already for several years, but I was junior in the sense of full time. And I can't remember I was on some committee with somebody from social science. I can't remember what we did. We pulled up, everybody's course proposals or something. But I was lost in that experience that time, being new, and it was kind of frightening. And this time, my experience has been that this is highly, highly organized. Is that an accident?
Reem, can I jump in first here?
Jump in.
I just want to say one thing, Hugo, which is if as a junior faculty member I ever was trying to give consulting advice on institutional and political rhetoric, I think that I was probably projecting and explaining my own strategy, and that I would say since then I've really come to realize that it takes an ecology of voices to move an institution, and I remain grateful for your voice and other voices, and we all have to speak in our own ways, and so
I'm the Malcolm X to your Martin Luther King. Is the analogy that
I think I'm more like Conan O'Brien over here. So let's keep those examples realistic. But I do want to just if I did come off that way, that sounds like something a certain. So anyway, it's
we're good.
As far as the transfer report, one thing I want you guys to take a look at and remember, the thing that has stuck with me, one of the things that stuck with me from all the data we generated is one of the key findings that I think never got anywhere was, one of the things I wanted to look at in the context of ASAP was what other expenses do all students incur? And one of the kind of mind-boggling things we found is that, like, at the time, even though this wasn't a sophisticated survey, we still surveyed hundreds of students, and a third of them had significant credit card debt that they had used to pay for supplies, MTA cards, basically just to meet expenses. As we know, 78% of our student body comes from households making under 25 a year, so they're scratching that stuff out. I'm kind of surprised some of them were extended credit. It seems a little bit like a point for reflection in many senses, and kind of I think we need to talk about an institution and a city in a country about extending low interest rate credit to students, possibly extremely low interest rate. If you remember, Elizabeth Warren said that student loans shouldn't have interest rates higher than 0.1% because so many financial institutions can borrow directly from the Fed at basically no cost when interest rates are this low.
Right.
And so I think there's a lot of different room for innovation, but also the students said in that survey that the mounting credit card debt was a factor in how many hours they were working per week, and ultimately a financially driven. It was part of a financially driven decision about whether or not they were going to stay in school. And as we know, the biggest predictor of whether or not students are retained is income, not GPA. And so I think that when we think about transfer and how to get students to graduation so they can transfer, in addition to all the theoretical things we might say about transferability of skills, et cetera, I think part of what we need to look more deeply into is the current status of private debt that students have taken on, particularly undocumented students that may have access themselves to forms of credit, but don't have access to certain kinds of financial scholarships given their citizenship status. So I just think there's a lot of different areas to look into where that data point might lead. And it should be kind of that. It's almost, sadly to say, it's going to be 10 years since all that in a couple of years. And I think that it's time to renew our inquiry into the status of all kinds of debt with our students, because this is the last thing I'll say there. You see a lot of CUNY talking points, which we can applaud, that say our students graduate without debt compared to private institutions, right, and we mobilize students into the middle class. But when you look at the fact that our graduation rate is at best 35%, 40% over a 6-year period, and you look at the remaining 6% that aren't retained, if you just look at what they owe in terms of tuition, that's not giving the full picture about what they owe because of college. And I think that until we can holistically apprehend the students in the household's true financial picture, no matter what we do as an institution or university, we're still going to lose students. And I think that that's especially important today as we emerge or not from the pandemic.
And actually, just to piggyback on that, Justin, I think you've said it very well. There's a recent article, the new study that was done by the Center for Urban Future just recently, that showed that basically at LaGuardia and all the CUNY community college students, they do need help covering the cost to get back to class, which include the cost for textbook, possibly childcare. And it takes us to our current situations where we're doing this self-study and we're doing all this work, and we're in the middle of pandemic, and obviously our enrollment has taken a hit, not just us, but nationally speaking. And so your inquiry and your question are so much spot on for us to, get back the college we've had before the pandemic. And just to say that those issues you said, they were there even before the pandemic, but the effect of the pandemic has just compounded on them. And those who have left, now the question is, how do we help bring them back?
Well, I think that, we've gotten off of the middle states. We're talking about the economic situation. If somebody can go, we're paying a kid $25 an hour to dig a hole and throw these like slices of wood into the ground. My wife's building a patio, and we got lucky because somebody told me they were paying $45 an hour to weed their yard in wherever it was, somewhere in Connecticut, like near
I believe it.
Westchester.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, if you wanted a job, like let's say you weren't taking advantage of the unemployment opportunity, the funding, you're out getting a job right now and making a bunch of money. And that's your main focus because you got to take care of things. And you know, another indicator is that inflation, which we haven't seen in decades, is now going to be with us solidly, probably for the next, you know, when we deal with this upswing of the pandemic and people going back and spending money and stuff. So, you know, I think that's, you know, because, you know, President Adams always says, oh, what happened? Like, the last time there was economic problems in 2007, this is before the two of you became teachers, we had a glut of folks coming back to school. We were, you know, we couldn't keep them, you know, they're just, we didn't have enough room. We were running, I remember running, you know, beginning drawing classes all the time in this one room that we would do it in, and we didn't have enough times for them. This time it's like, they're not coming. And I mean, obviously they're going to the 4-year institutions, but I think right now it's a combination thing. It's also part of this, what you're talking about, which is the fact that if they've got to decide whether they're going to pay rent and eat or go to school, what are they going to choose? So
I think one way to sort of contextualize this within Middle States is to say, I do remember coming into college 10 years ago in the wake of that enrollment surge following the great financial crisis, and hearing Gordon speak at many instructional staff meetings and various people on the committee speak. And I do remember thinking to myself, I like the way that this self-study speaks to institutional-wide problems and institutional-wide processes. And I did feel that reactivated in my time in the Senate, especially in the wake of Pathways, when it was kind of a university crisis around the curriculum. And it is interesting to think that self-study was conducted in the wake of that enrollment surge, and that this one is happening during the enrollment contraction following or in the midst of this pandemic. And it is rather easy to move a conversation from the self-study into this kind of larger economic and health crisis context, in part because one of the benefits of these regional accreditors asking us every 8 to 10 years to explain ourselves and to use evidence to explain it is it gives you an opportunity to have a large strategic conversation with a lot of the different people in the community, a lot of the different parts of the institution, and sort of ask, who are we, where have we been, and where are we going? And those are big questions. And I feel like, you know, the three of us and our kind of professional networks at the college also enjoy those questions, which is how the two of you found yourselves not only in the roles you're in now, but the roles you've been in. And why I think the three of us have stumbled into each other is because there's some element of these larger questions that we enjoy, but to ask those big, broad questions, it also requires us to think about a sort of range of scales. So, you know, when we talk about chapter 5 of the self-study and think about how do we know students are learning at LaGuardia, and, you know, even to get to a question of how do we know that they're going to learn in the next 10 years, part of that means is we have to look at syllabi. We have to look at assignments. We have to look at the data that we've collected in the benchmark readings where we score student work over the last 5 or 6 years. And for all of the chapters, when you think about governance and when you think about leadership, when you think about student affairs, you have to sort of think at the strategic level, but you also, and this is the thing that I think Reem and I have enjoyed doing, you have to keep bouncing those strategic conversations off of the actual evidence at hand. You know, you claim to do something or to value something, but if you can't produce a document that shows that you've been addressing that in a sustainable way over a period of time, it's just an empty claim. And so part of what the Middle States Regional Accreditor team is going to be looking for is not just who do you say you are and what do you say you're doing efficiently or effectively or whatever, but also can you prove it? And I think that's a different game to play than just a game where you're on the website looking at the mission and values. Reem, does that fit in with what your experience is on this?
Yeah. I mean,
wait a minute. Before you answer that question, I'm going to do the station break early because we're going to just move into this now.
Cool.
So you're watching what's going on and listening to what's going on. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez, here on LaGuardia Web Radio, WLGR. Be on the lookout because we're going to be changing our image. So we're going to be getting a new name or new call letters. Let's put it that way. And my guests today are professors Reem Jafar from the Math, Engineering, and Computer Science Department, and Justin Rogers Cooper of the English Department, who are the co-chairs of the Middle States Self-Study Process and the committee. So take it away, Reem. Sorry to stop.
Sure. I mean, you've been part of the process, Hugo, and you actually came to several of the town hall, and you were part of Chapter 7. So bouncing it off Middle States, we have noticed how exactly what Justin said has actually surfaced as major themes, and they're really interconnected. So one of our themes was actually strengthening learning, and particularly there's this recommendations around expanding learning opportunities for all students. And then we've had these other themes about shared governance and about one college. How could we as one college collaborate? And we have the new piece from the adult and continuing ed. How do we take advantage of all the resources we have while maintaining the identity of each divisions in some way? And so this is also where I found that things were intertwined. So in strengthening learning, we always talked about co-curricular learning, and that's something that the college has already started. You were saying, if the students is getting paid this much, why do they want to go back to college? I mean, this is the moment right now, but I do feel we do have at LaGuardia this innovative culture where the college did start working on co-curricular learning and experiential learning. And now throughout the self-study, we learned about the division of adult and continuing ed. And I think President Adam, maybe in one of the town hall, he mentioned stackability. And I know, for example, that we have fields that constantly change. I'm personally from math, engineering, and computer science. And I know computer science, if you get your degree 10 years ago, not even 20 years ago, it's a completely different animal than today's degree. You've got cybersecurity, you've got fields on network security. And so there are things that are really well done, in the department that I've seen where the curriculum has really evolved to reflect the needs of today's workforce and to give them the credentials they need to get a maybe higher paying job. While at the same time, that self-study showed me the other aspects of the college that I didn't understand. And right now, as we're revising, we started the process. We are really thinking about those larger questions. What does it mean, this idea of one college?
And well, it's interesting because you're talking about this, and this sounds like something President Adams has been talking about. Like he showed up in his 5-point plan, this idea of not being siloed. So is this something that came out of the study that just happened to coincide, or is the president, nudging us into a direction of thinking, and it's already we're already seeing signs of it in the Middle States work?
So, I like what
you were getting. You knew what you were getting into when you showed up.
Yeah. So two things here to mention. So it's funny because, as you remember, the 7 town halls weren't really the only town halls we've done. Justin knew that we've actually been invited to visit Students Affair. We've been invited to visit ACE. We've been invited. And so we've had all these meetings with units, with folks, So one thing I want to say is Justin and I, when we went to the Division of Adult and Continuing Ed, the meeting has actually gone over time because of the conversation we had with the stakeholders over there. And at the same time, if you read along along chapter 4, which was led by Lanaya Du Bois and Alan Quish, it's their work. And in their work, some of these themes emerge. So just to make things clear, just to answer the question as flat out as you've asked it, the 7 chapters were really the work done by the 120 members of these group, to which we owe a great, amount of gratitude. And as you've seen, they've used the evidence that Justin has said. When you talk about something, what is the evidence? And so their work has been done using the evidence at hand. So that's one part of it. All the narratives and all the recommendations and everything that came from the town hall were really the product of the working group. But at the same time, when we went to the divisions of adult and continuing ed, and we've had those conversations with them, we've learned so much, and we've learned not just really what they want, but they also want to maintain their own identity as a divisions, just like we want to maintain our own identity as academic affairs. But there were a few places where we found really we could learn from each other. And this is really where we're trying to go. And anything that has a recommendation that would come concretely from this one college themes. Right now, the language is not about mixing up, but more about coordinating ACE, academic affairs, and students' affairs in a way that, maintain our strong academic program in a way that recognizes each division's identity, while trying to think what does it mean to support all of our students who walk in to our campuses, whether they're in ACE, where there is an traditional academic programs. And with that, I'll bounce it back to Justin.
Well, that covers a great deal of it. And all I would add is maybe 2 points. One, we, in our conversations with President Adams, have never been told to put anything in the report, nor to direct a conversation in any way. And so we've been given a lot of autonomy. We've had more regular conversations with the special advisor, Robert Jaffe, with Provost Arcario, with our Dean of Institutional Effectiveness, Nava Lair. They've all been great. Most of those conversations are us telling them, here's the agenda, because we have these questions, and they sit there and problem solve and answer questions. They've never set in the agenda. They say, like, the agenda you sent to us sounds good. They've been doing that for like almost 2 years now. And so we've kind of been given a lot of free room to sort of listen to the working groups and build the conversation from there. I do think it's interesting that there was a convergence around one college, but it was not intentional nor set from the top. And I also think that, and this is my second point with Reem, the watershed moment was the conversation we had as a group with ACE. And one of the things that Reem and I said in that conversation was, it's stunning to us that ACE plays such an interesting and pivotal role at the college and has been doing so, but that we as faculty have never heard of it until we became co-chairs of Middle States, as in it went anything past just knowing that it existed, and that plain fact. We have learned so much about the history of the college. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll give it back to Reem, is one of the things that folks told us in ACE is they have felt marginalized, and their students have felt marginalized at this college for a long time. And so part of our move to deepen and integrate the role of one college as a theme, as it emerged from the working groups in the self-study, is that we actually are trying to honor the conversation and emotions of longtime members of this LaGuardia community and to respect their point of view and experiences.
I also want to add that this is not really new. When we did the strategic plan priorities, which is one of the things I failed to mention in my own intro, this is something I did. I co-chaired in 2019. This was my first overview of the whole college. This actually emerged as one of the strategic plan priorities, advancing career and workforce development, goal number 5. Mm-hmm. And if you read under those, the sub goals, this is a strategic plan priorities, and the goals were to make a greater use of ACE labor market indicator, strengthen and diversify STEM, and also, build this bridge from ACE to the credit sides of the house. So although this has come more interesting in the past year or so because of the research done in Middle States and because of the opportunities it gave us to talk with colleagues in ACE, it's really not you. It came from the strategic plan priorities.
Well, so this is interesting. So yeah, again, maybe it's in the zeitgeist or something. But so now we know President Adams is part of this think tank out of DC, and they've written their own report.
Mm-hmm.
And now, so you talk about, so prove that you're talking about proving learning, but he talks in terms of outcomes. And now the new outcome is, I mean, for a period of time, and this was under President Mello, the outcome was really about transfer and, graduating, students achieving the dream, transfer. In his report, it talks about you want to prove you're doing something, get people a job. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. It's like when we get out of here. And so we look at ACE as this vehicle to maybe get people into the academic piece of it. But now here we're looking at, so it's not enough to graduate a student. It's like, do they have a future in the workforce? Are they going to, we talk about getting people into the middle class. But how do we prove that? How do we achieve that? Is that found itself somehow in the middle states language that you're dealing with?
Not specifically, but one thing that caught my attention is that having worked on periodic program reviews, academic program reviews for the last few years, when we were norming our last program review guideline document to CUNY documents that were doing similar program review guidelines, one of the things that caught attention out of Borough of Manhattan Community College, where our CUNY colleague Chris Schultz is, or was, I think he's still there, is that their academic program review guidelines had a whole section called Family Sustaining Wage, and it was part of the section on like labor market scanning for that program and its graduates. And that really caught my attention because part of what it was asking faculty to answer was, how do you know your program graduates students who can earn a family sustaining wage in your career? And so I think that the reason I say that is those guidelines dated back to 2018, and I believe the report you're referring to, Hugo, is around that same time period. So I think it's a larger conversation that's being asked of 2- and 4-year public institutions in general, and I think it's important, but I don't know that it's shown up explicitly in any middle states criteria. Is that true, Reem?
Yeah, it hasn't really shown up explicitly in any criteria, no. I mean, look at our mission. Our mission is to educate and graduate. So it has a graduation component in it, if you think about it. And you could interpret whether graduation meaning getting a job in 2 years or transferring. It could mean either, given the distributions of our students' age population, but it hasn't really showed up in any explicit language. And I think the first draft is public, and the final draft will be public in September.
So until we change the mission to say educate, graduate, and employ the most diverse population in the community.
That's a big commitment.
Yeah. You said it, not us.
And here I am. I mean, like I've always said it, like, people think they're going to get rid of me when they get out of my class. I show up at graduation. I started showing up and I realized, like, oh, wow, they're actually graduating. They just don't go off into this ether, and I don't know what happens to them. And then, I started sharing, they were friending me in Facebook, and I find out where they're going, and then they're having kids. And I don't know if I live long enough and they don't, maybe I'll see where they end up in that sense. But for me personally, it's like, it only begins with the final grade, in a sense. But I can appreciate that others don't necessarily see it that way. Like their idea is like, I teach my class, I teach it well. They get out of here, like in your case, writing well. In your case, thinking mathematically. Everybody's in a different place.
I agree with you, and I also think, I mean, we're obviously in academic affairs. And like we said, even when we talked with folks from ACE, I think there was this desire in having, their own identities in a way, but collaborate and coordinate in a way that mutually benefit us. I want to say, too, that if you look, like I mentioned computer science just because I am from that department, and it is a fast changing field. But if you look from 10 years ago to 20 years ago to now, let's say look at inquiry and problem solving. This is a skill that actually is needed in that particular field because it's all about really problem solving. The tools may be changing, the technologies. 20 years ago was Java. Now you have other programs. So what I wanted to say is, we also strongly believe that based on, the assessments we have data from in Standard 5 that, is going to make it to the revised versions, that any students, who enter our program based on PPR data, we strongly believe that we're really employing them in our academic affair units to be, the workers of this current day and time. And I think also the other thing that sometimes we hear, and it's not really coming from LaGuardia, I was reading this article that there's a major tech company, which I shall remain anonymous on this podcast, is creating their own certificates, and you just need to take their training and then they'll employ you. And I have to admit to you, as a faculty, I did feel threatened by that particular company's approach because I'm like, when you educate somebody, you educate them holistically. For you to say all of these, whether you're talking about 2 or 4 year degree, not just 2 years degree, for a company to come and take over, I do feel this is something we have to be aware of as a nation, not just as a college. This is the larger scheme of things as a nation. There are some tech companies that are coming and they're issuing their own curriculum, their own certificate that you just need that. No bachelor, no associate, no stackable credential at the college, nothing. And I think we have to collectively think as practitioners nationwide. How do we respond to that?
We're moving into the last part of the show, which is the future. So let's talk about we've just finished year 2. The thing has been written. It's a tome. I'm sure you're working on turning it into 100 pages or whatever it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
What are we looking at? What's going to happen next year? Starting in the fall, let's say. Starting with fall 2021 here through 2022.
You just start with September, maybe. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So you might remember, we just had a ton of those town halls in May, month, town hall crazy times. And so we got so much information. We're using that information to revise over the summer. When September rolls around, we're going to share the revised self-study 100-page document with the community. We're going to have one town hall, just one, with one asynchronous session, as opposed to the 8 synchronous sessions and 48 hours of asynchronous sessions we had in May. We're going to make sure that this document reflects, the kind of majority consensus around these recommendations and around our narrative. And then we're going to submit it to the chair of the Middle States site visit team sometime in late October, I believe. That chair will then come in November. The chair will offer some feedback on the report and on our strategies for the Middle States site visit that will occur in March of 22. The site visit will occur. It'll go so well. We will be reaccredited. And then the more interesting part of the future for me is that at the end of next spring, the college will be reaccredited. We will have officially certified 7 to 10 major strategic recommendations, and our college governance will be through a major revision in which groups like Faculty Council, the Committee of Faculty in the Senate itself, will have revised responsibilities and powers, arguably, based on my partial knowledge of the situation. And the college will have just had years of strategic reflection and thinking at the time when our first year returning back, at least partially from COVID, has taken place. Next summer is going to be an extremely pivotal moment for determining the kind of decade that LaGuardia is going to enter. And I cannot say enough about how important it will be on all sides for the faculty, staff, administration, the college community to be on the same page or as close as possible to it as we look to fall, not 21, but fall 22. And I would predict that the kind of the energy around our college's movements and organization will be matching some very important regional and national transformations that will be happening in higher education. I think it's going to be career defining for the three of us and for everyone listening to this. And as we remake ourselves at the end of this experience, I think what we have to understand is we are transforming ourselves at a moment when the entire higher education system is transforming itself, when the university that we're a part of is transforming itself. And it'll be, I think, approaching paradigmatic shifts. Kuhnian paradigm movements are going to happen here that will affect how we teach, I believe, until we retire here in the next 25, 30 years. Yep. That's what I'd say.
Reem, is there anything you could add to that?
There's a mushroom cloud coming in.
My God, he like sanctified it at the end there. It's really
that was just my job.
I like the Cooper touch. That's his job.
I know. Oh, yeah, he get him going there. But what's interesting is when you said career defining, and I said, career, because you're saying I'm getting career defined. I do this thing on weekends where I get together with like people I went to undergraduate with who are all photographers, and we look at each other's pictures and we drive each other crazy. And but part of it is about keep taking pictures, right? I'm a photographer, that's my thing. And it's a support network of sorts. But I was thinking about that, maybe it was this morning, and I said that, but in the end, I'm a college professor. Let's say I spend certainly more than half of my professional life doing this for a living. I'm a teacher. I'm pedantic. I come from a long line of pedantic people.
Mm-hmm.
And this is who we are. And but reinventing myself, because and I say this to people all the time, by the time you figure out how to teach a class, that's when oh great, now I have to start all over again because the jokes don't work anymore. The activities aren't as engaged. Something happens, like it's a generational thing, and it happens like about every 5 years for me.
Yeah.
But it may be accelerating now with technology, because I've told people, like, I feel like I have to be like, my kids are watching K-pop videos. So unless I show up in a rhinestone cowboy outfit and I'm dancing, talking about photography, I don't know how I'm keeping their attention. I can't compete against Mortal Kombat, 9. But in the end, I'm a college professor. I mean, all the stuff we're talking about, you're serious about this. Reem, you're serious about it. I'm serious about this.
Mm-hmm.
How do we make everybody else serious about this? How do we make them realize how important Middle States is? I don't know. Sorry, that just came out of somewhere. What do you want to say?
So I don't know if I need to redo the sales pitch of Justin. I mean, the reason why it's important, like he said, it's going to define our major identity as a college. If you think about it, every 10 years, every decade, spending those 2 years at home, we're kind of, not a setback, but we're a kind of, a different, I do feel it was like a turning point. I think once we go back next spring, and we have the revision of the governance plan, we have the site visits, I think it's important for folks to understand that this college is the college for all. It's really us who are planning to be here 20, 30 years talking about career definition. Doesn't really mean we're going to change career or we're going to look for other position, but it really means taking the college in the direction where we want it to be for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And it's really not up to one single person to do this. Yes, we have leadership, but we're the faculty, like you said. We're the one who sees students every day. We're the one who solve issues every day. The staff, the same thing. They have so many students' needs to deal with. And so I feel really those recommendations that will be finalized is going to define who we are for the next 10 years, let's just say. And we all have a stake in these institutions. I mean, when we were probably a pair of rookies, not knowing, like we said, it's been
Yeah,
non-linear.
you were happy-go-lucky.
I was almost smiling. But what I'm really trying to say, it's really by career defining, it's really, all of us, every single one of us have stakes in this institution. Like you said, I'm a college professor at the end of the day, even if I put on myself a rhino outfit.
Well, I think you hit it on the head, and people don't get this, but when you talk about strategic plan, I remember when Brett used to bring in the strategic plan, and we'd have to, deal with it in the Senate. And I used to say to people, that's how they're going to determine how they spend money.
Mm-hmm.
That
Resource allocation.
these 6 to 10 things that you talked about that we're going to focus on are going to be tied into strategic plans, and the budget will be leveraged in a way to execute that goal. And so when people are talking about, I want to do this, I want to do that, and it's like, but there's no money. Well, it's because the money is going to what the common good, you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And people need to understand that sure, it's a bunch of essays on paper and ideas and all these kinds of things, but in the end, when the rubber hits the road, this is kind of like the map we're going to follow.
But I have to add something to this, that before, I could see people's attitude when I was in the Senate, like you, about the strategic plan, because CUNY used to set those large strategic goals, and we used to fill in this bucket, fill in that bucket. While we still meet all of CUNY's big ideas and big strategic goals, we as a college, we started setting our own strategic plan that basically meets the CUNY strategic goals, but at the same time respect our identities, our needs, and our culture. And I think hopefully, we started this in 2019. Hopefully this spills over, all the future strategic plans. And so the college community understands what's their stake. They participate in the design of the strategic plan in a way that reflects, the day-to-day dealing with the students and how to accomplish our mission. And so these parts of it, I have to say, have changed a bit. So hopefully folks, when they participate in the strategic plan and then the resources get allocated, they feel it's more inclusive and it's more transparent and it's more, they have a stake in it. Yes, you may not be the president, but just like you, we're stakeholders. And Justin will let you.
Well, we're moving into thank yous and goodbye. So if you can wrap that up, I'll give you a couple of minutes, and then we'll go out with a little more Pink Floyd.
I think Pink Floyd's an ideal soundtrack for this, because one of the things that I've read in the history of assessment is that the whole assessment culture that we understand as part of our college community with the competencies and everything else, it emerged out of an assessment for learning movement that itself emerged out of the kind of neoliberal austerity of the 1980s, when there was this key link severed between public investment in higher education and sort of what higher education said it was doing. And to me, that's the signal crisis, and that we're entering another signal crisis right now, because students aren't coming to college anymore. And they're not coming because they're afraid, they're broke, and there's some fundamental link about what we're going to do for them that's been severed because of this pandemic. And so we have to think in new ways about how to bring the students back, and also to articulate the value of what it is we do. And I think that that's the reason for my, kind of insane comment 5 minutes ago. And I think that part of what is incumbent upon us to be able to show
that
all of them, part of what it would be incumbent upon us to show, and I'll end in this 30-second little window here, is we need to show why the public's investment in our students is worth it. And we need to explain that to them, and we need to explain it to the public, because part of the reason why we continually face austerity isn't just because of the selfish managers of our society and what you will. It's also because we haven't done a good enough job of explaining how investment works in the long term. And part of it is to say we move students into the middle class, but we also need to be able to show that we're capable of transforming lives in new ways in the 21st century, and that we're not afraid to rise to the challenges of this moment. And I think that that's part of what I wanted to kind of convey, is that it's a big 50-year window that we're moving out of, and we're moving into the next 50-year window. And that's what I mean by transformational. And so thank you for having us, Hugo. And this is how I motivate myself to edit 150 pages of single-spaced prose to get to this self-study.
The Office of the Controller did actually produce this year a report about the value of CUNY educations. And I think, like you said, we have on the national scale, I think we have to do a better job at communicating, our value because we think we're valued.
We need to learn to sing our song.
Yeah.
I want to thank you both for being on the show. Thanks everybody who's been watching. This is What's Going On. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez, here on LaGuardia Web Radio, WLGR, and my guests today are our Middle States Self-Study co-chairs. And I'm remembering, Gordon had to do that by himself last time. That was something we learned, have co-chairs. They are Professors Reem Jafar of the Math, Engineering, Computer Science Department, and Professor Justin Rogers Cooper of the English Department. And we are going to take us out, or we're going to have our engineer take us out the way we came in with a little Pink Floyd. This is in honor of our service folks who are coming back at the end of a very long Afghan war. Thanks for watching and listening. Bye.
Thank you, Hugo.
Thank you.